En este archivo sonar recordamos la conversación que tuvimos el 2023 con Steven Wilson. Como siempre, un tipo profundo, plagado de objetivos y con un saludable presente artístico. Tocamos el estado actual del rock, también lógicamente reflexionamos sobre ese emotivo concierto de Porcupine Tree en el Movistar Arena, la reunión de la banda, cómo fue componer un nuevo disco con el grupo que lo transformó en un referente de culto para el rock y por supuesto de Harmony Codex, su más reciente disco solista. Los planes de un tipo que aún tiene cuerda para rato. Es un referente del rock contemporáneo, Steven Wilson, en el archivo sonar.
Hi, this is Steven Wilson, and you're listening to Radio Sonar. Enjoy the music. Thank you. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I mean, it felt much lighter than it did in the past, you know, because we kind of knew it was a one-off and we were
Yeah.
just enjoying playing together again. And we were playing a lot of old music, but also we'd made this new record as well. So there was a lot more fun and joy in it than I remember from when it was, you know, from when it was the day job. So from that point of view, I'm so happy we did it. If it is the last time we play together, and it might not be, but if it is, I think it was a really wonderful way to finish. And I think the fans' reaction was amazing. They seemed to love it too. So yeah, and we had a great show in Chile. That was a thrilling evening for sure. Yeah. Well, kind of. Porcupine Tree, most of the music on that album was actually written a long time ago, like in 2012, 2013. So there wasn't a lot of writing that needed to be done for that record. But the answer to your question is I started, so my previous record, The Future Bites, came out almost, you know, more than 3 years ago. It came out in right at the beginning. No, it came out, yeah, almost 3 years ago. It came out at the beginning of 2021,
Yeah,
didn't it? And
definitely.
it had been postponed from um, the previous year because of lockdown. So I had that album finished 3 years ago. And I started to make this record pretty much around the start of lockdown. So I
Okay.
found myself in this very strange situation, which is I was in a kind of enforced isolation, unable to interact with other musicians, you know, like everyone in the business. And I don't want to call this, you know, my lockdown album because that's become already a bit of a cliche, hasn't it? But in some senses, it was my lockdown album. I found myself writing really without any interaction with other musicians,
Yeah.
and maybe it took me in a more relaxing, you know, I wasn't so concerned about, I wasn't so aware of um you know, this idea that this is going to be released. I was making music kind of to pass the time. I'd had a tour cancelled, so I kind of suddenly had all this time available to me, and I was just enjoying making music. And at the same time, I was working on a book, and in that book is a short story called The Harmony Codex. So I found myself developing the music and the ideas behind the music and the album alongside this fictional short story that I was writing. And I think it led to the album having this very cinematic quality to it.
Yeah.
It flows like, to me, it flows more like a piece of cinema than a rock and roll album, you know. So I think that was all part and parcel of the fact that it was connected to this story, and it was happening during lockdown. And I spent a long time, I mean, 3 years working on this record, really. There's a lot of attention to detail inside the music, that's for sure. It's a hard question to answer because, I mean, my immediate reaction is I would never want to do that. But then my second reaction, my second perhaps more considered reaction would be, if there's a creative way
Mm.
to use it, then I'm always curious about new technology. And I think the you know, there's been many instances in the history of music where musicians were terrified about what sampling was going to do to the industry, what drum machines were going to do to the industry, what even the nature of recorded music was going to do to
Mm.
the industry. So there's always an immediate kind of fear, I think, which manifests when some massive technological shift occurs. Now, it's fair to say this one is more worrying than most
Definitely.
because it almost eliminates the need for a human presence altogether. And how can that be anything but bad? If, you know, from the point of view of someone who thinks of themselves as creator, how can that be anything else but bad? To
Yeah.
just remove yourself completely from the equation. But at the same time, for example, my wife she's using things like ChatGPT to
Yeah.
help her. She's not just taking stuff, but she's using it to help her. She works in the psychology industry, so she's
Yeah.
using it to develop ideas and as a kind of starting point, which she then will develop and expand on. So if you think of these things as tools, then I think there is potential for them to be useful. If you think of them as something that's going to start creating new Beatles records,
Yeah.
or you know, new Led Zeppelin records without the need for any musicians, I find that a very ugly and very inhuman concept. Of course I do. It seems to me to go against everything that art is supposed to be. Art is supposed to be a mirror to the human soul. And how can it be a mirror to the human soul when it hasn't even been created by human beings? So I find that side of things very, very ugly indeed. But you know, it's so early. I think we're right to be worried, and we're right to be asking questions about this. But there's no question that we can't now pretend it's not happening, because it is. Yeah, it's very hard because, you know, I think it's true of music as well. There are some films and there are some TV shows and there is some music that is so generic, so easy to see that it merely subscribes to a set of rules and parameters that you can easily imagine a computer creating it. To be honest, I find most modern pop music sounds like it could have been created by a computer. It's so formulaic. It sounds so processed. There is nothing surprising. There is nothing unexpected in the music. Everything is simply a series of rules and trying to get the listener engaged as quickly as possible within 15 seconds. And I can totally understand how a computer could create that music. And there's a lot of TV like that. And there's a lot of movies like that too. I mean, most of these Hollywood blockbuster movies, you know, superhero movies, most of them could easily be written by a computer. But the point I'm making is this, that the really beautiful art, I think, is the art that thinks outside of genre and thinks outside of a set of rules and parameters. And that applies to music, literature, film, TV, painting, any art form you care to mention, dance. The most beautiful art, the most transcendent art, and the most timeless art is the art that doesn't simply obey a set of rules and thinks outside of those rules. So I think the threat to generic art is very real. I think the threat to art that is more unique and timeless and has more personality from the people that creates it is much less so. But time will tell, because I might prove to be completely wrong about that too. Maybe the AI learns to imitate that as well. I think most people in the music world know who I am. But when I say I'm not a mainstream artist, I'm thinking more about the more kind of general public. I'm very far from being a household name with people that just, you know, they just enjoy music. A lot of those people still don't know who Steven Wilson is and have never heard of me. But at the same time, I'm fortunate to be, I think I'm thought of in the industry as almost like a musician's musician. A lot of musicians seem to admire, if not my music, they admire the way I've gone about my career. They admire the fact that I've been uncompromising, that I've constantly changed, that I like to think that I do things with integrity. And I'm very lucky that if I reach out to other musicians, I think they understand that at the very least, if they're working on one of my projects, it's going to be something interesting. It's not going to be something boring or generic. It's going to be something interesting. So there are lots of musicians out there that I can reach out to, and most of them will be at the very least interested to talk to me about what I have in mind. And I don't underestimate how fortunate I am and what a privilege it is to be able to do that. So yes, it's a real honor to have those guys involved. And as you say, on this record, I've worked with some new people I've never worked with before. Mannix, Roland from Tears for Fears has done a fantastic version of a song. Interpol. So yeah, very exciting to me. It's you know, these are people I grew up listening to their music, so it's extraordinary to be able to, you know, to work with them on something of my own. We went to see Barbie last year with our two daughters. Yeah, last week we went to see Barbie with our two daughters. Yeah, and we had a lot of fun. It's a fantastic family movie, isn't it? Yeah, that was the last time I saw a movie. Yeah, yeah. My God, wow! Do you know what? You might be going back. You might be going back years. I honestly haven't been that interested in rock music for such a long time now. I tell you what, I have discovered recently. In fact, I'll show you. I'll pull up.
Terrific. Show me.
Yeah, I'll show you these. I've been checking out this catalog from the
Wow.
mid 70s, right? Okay, so I've always been a big fan of this band. Okay, but there's a whole part of their catalog discography that is very relatively unknown. Okay, everyone knows the very early Bee Gees songs, and everyone knows Saturday Night Fever, Disco. But these, do you know this album, Cucumber Castle from 1969? Yeah. You know these records, okay. 2 Years On from 1970.
Incredible.
Amazing record. Trafalgar, do you know that one?
No, that one no.
What a good, just, I mean, this record, Mr. Natural from 1974.
Yeah.
I'm a massive Bee Gees fan anyway, but even as a fan, I didn't know a lot of these records, and I just started getting really into them recently. And wow, I mean, what genius! This album, Life in a Tin Can, just genius songwriting. Wow, I mean, I really like Christine and the Queens. Do you know Christine and the Queens? This album, hold on.
Sorry, I'm not sure.
Album she's done. She's a French artist. The French artist. This album. This is an amazing record.
Incredible.
Paranoia Angels, True Love.
Incredible.